Jeepers! You're listening to Smash or Pass.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another interview on the JayBee and Milly channel. I'm JayBee and joining me is Milly.
Hi.
And our guest host today is Kaila from the Scooby in the Know Instagram account. And interviewing today we'll have the pleasure of being joined by Mr. Jeremy Adams.
I'm a mister. Okay, I'll take it.
Well, thank you so much for joining. It is genuinely an absolute honor to have you here. And, you know, you've been involved with a number of Scooby Doo projects over the years, such as the Lego shorts, the Sword and the Scoob, ScoobyNatural. But prior to embarking on these ventures, what was your knowledge like, or your background with the Scooby franchise like?
Well, I am a person of a certain age, so Scooby Doo was a staple growing up. And for me growing up, it was like you get those guest star episodes when I was little, the original Scooby run, where it would be like, you know, the Harlem Globetrotters or Batman, and those were always going to be good ones. So, you know, those would come on Sunday afternoons a lot of times where I'm from, and so Scooby was just a part of your life, and there wasn't that many superhero things too. So when Scooby Doo showed up with Batman, I was like, this is the best day ever, you know. So it's a weird thing. Deceptively, Scooby is one of those things that's known all throughout the world, and you don't necessarily think about it. It's just in your background mind sometimes. And yeah, I grew up with Scooby, and I've seen tons of Scooby Doo, and then obviously, as you were saying, when I started getting older and I started writing, and Jim Krieg, who, you know, is my mentor friend, you know, he's the Scooby Dooologist, was like, hey, I needed some money. I was a stay-at-home dad, and I was trying to break into writing, and he offered me an opportunity to do some of these Lego shorts. And it was kind of like my reintroduction to Scooby Doo. Like, my growing up with Scooby Doo, you just watch Scooby Doo, and that's what Scooby Doo is. But Jim had given me these like really old like yellow books that are like dire, like this is Scooby Doo. Like he has a very specific vision of Scooby Doo. He's like, there is no supernatural, there'll never be supernatural, and this is what you need to read, and you need to, you know, memorize it. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And of course, it was like these really tiny shorts, and that's when I jumped into writing Scooby Doo stuff. And yeah, so that's kind of how I got started. But growing up, it was on all the time. I mean, I probably saw the same shows 100 times. And then I have two daughters, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to try it out, you know, with my youngest daughter who's 6. And you know, Scooby, especially the original one, the background art is so spooky, and some of the creature designs are so spooky that I was like, oh, is this going to scare her? But no, she was like, another. Like, she just wanted to keep rolling down, you know, all the Scoobies that were on Tubi at the moment, you know. So the first and second run of Scoobies, I didn't really watch some of the other versions of Scooby. I had never even heard of 13 Ghosts until my friend Tim started writing it. We were supposed to be doing like a trilogy, like a trilogy of movies. I'm rambly, by the way. You brought me on here, but I'm going to ramble. And then I was like, oh, so I kind of got acclimated with that. And when I really started writing, I started getting more and more acclimated with the property. And I've pitched so many Scooby things that they've never let me do. I tried to do a Fred Jones Man of Action thing where it was so silly. And they were like, no, you're not going to do that. I mean, there's a lot of like Scooby stuff that I've tried to throw out there.
I mean, I'd say something Fred-based is kind of overdue. So we have, you know, the Shaggy and Scooby show. We have Daphne and Velma, a movie, a book, but there is nothing on Fred. So
I know
it's certainly overdue. And I guess something else that was really interesting that you were saying there is your introduction to writing for Scooby was that it's never supernatural, for you to then go and work on ScoobyNatural, which was just you kind of proving everybody that, you know, it doesn't have to be that way, because that was amazing, and I'm looking forward to coming on to that. But like, through either writing or watching it when you were younger, perhaps that Fred idea was an indication of this. But did you ever have a favorite member of the gang?
I mean, it's weird because it's like I can't separate Scooby and Shaggy. So it's like, you know, I love them because they're constantly just the bait, or they're getting in trouble, or what. But, you know, I mean, let's just take Scooby out of it. Let me talk about the other people, because like Scooby, it's the name of the show. He's the funny dog. He's the one doing things. He'll do it for Scooby Snack. Shaggy is the other guy who I was like, this is really weird. This guy's willing to do anything for Scooby Snack too. Like he's he's best friends with his dog. But I've come to really like Fred, mainly because of his traps, and they've kind of increasingly made him a sillier and sillier. But I really do like him. And in my head, because I have my own head canon, and I'm like, oh no, he's like part of an organization like Kingsman, you know, that, but they have like different color ascots that like indicate how high up they are in the organization. Like I have this whole thought, and he's got the van, and you know, and he's always meaning well. I like them all. I mean, Velma obviously is the one that has probably got it the most together, and Daphne is too. But you know, danger prone Daphne, you know, some things go awry, and it also just depends on which version of Scooby you're talking about. But Shaggy, I don't know. I have my heart. I don't know if it's because he was based on, you know, Dobie Gillis, you know, the Gilligan guy, Bob Denver's, and I used to watch that on Nick at Night, and so like I knew who this character is. So I don't know. I'm just gonna go with Shaggy right now.
That's great. And you mentioned your project working with Scooby Doo Lego. How did the writing for that specific Scooby Lego type of crossover happen? How did it come about?
You know what was funny is I came up with like, gosh, I don't know, 10 really short ideas, maybe more. Jim and I sat down and we were just like, and it was just a gag, you know, it was just like a setup gag because they had to be so short. And it was to promote that I think the Lego Scooby set that was coming out. And I didn't know that the guys who do the Robot Chicken was going to be Stupid Buddy. The animation group was going to animate it. And because I had done some animation previously, I thought, oh, I'll see what this turns out to be in like 2 years. But they had animated them within like a month. It was crazy. But yeah, we sat down and just kind of like, my favorite one is the trick or treat one, when they figure out if you knock on the door and say trick or treat, you know, you're gonna get candy, and so they just keep changing their costumes to get some. And I thought, oh, that's so funny, and to be able to play with all the characters and the Lego characters that Lego had come up with for the play sets that are also just classic characters from the cartoon. And that was actually my first. I think that might have been my first project I did with Lego, which then, you know, spiraled off into 100 other Lego things. But it was great. It was really cool. And to see it animated and how fast they did it, I'm like, why aren't we doing these as shows? Like, this could be a really fun, you know, Lego Scooby show outside of the CGI one that like Jim wrote. It's like as a stop motion animation would be really, really fun because they did such a good job animating it.
Yeah, it would just be amazing, especially because for all, you know, the Scooby characters more often than not are animated. So say if, you know, they are meant to drop down, they can do things like run on the spot and then drop down a bit later for comedic effect. And no one really bats an eye. But at the end of the day, I think people do tend to abide by the laws of realism. Whereas Lego, I think you can do a lot more with it, a lot more wackiness. And it's interesting. You mentioned that the Lego shorts especially were kind of, you know, going hand on hand with some of the promotional toy material. So was this affected in your writing at all? Like, were you ever required to showcase this new product, or was it quite a lot of freedom?
Yeah. So I mean, I had seen the toys, and generally there's a certain element, especially when you're doing something with Lego or a toy company in general. Part of the process is to try to sell the toy in a way. But I'm a writer, so at the heart of me is like kind of an artist. It's like, how can I do that organically without it feeling yucky? You know, how can I make it fun? And so they're like, these are the sets that we have. These are the characters that we have. And then it's like, oh, okay. And now it becomes like an improv game, right? Where they're like, name a location, name an occupation, you know. So now it's like, it becomes a lot more fun. It's not, I need to shine a light on this. It's more like, I can use this to tell a really funny gimmick, or I can use it and it gives me an idea for a really fun, like I think we did the lighthouse one with Daphne closing the door and it all crumbles down. And it's like, oh, that's funny because now we know who Daphne is and there's a lighthouse. So as a viewer, you're just kind of watching it and having a good time. And so anyways, that's kind of how I feel about it, is I'm just having a good time using it like an improv tool. And I try not to think about the corporate aspect of it sometimes.
I mean, it certainly was a good time to watch as well. And I guess something else that I'm looking forward to speaking about, as I said earlier, is ScoobyNatural. So do you remember how that crossover came about? Because like you were saying, it kind of wasn't something that you'd initially think about, because we did enter an era where they were quite insistent that Scooby was never going to be supernatural again.
Yeah. What had happened was, at Warner Brothers, they were doing two they're constantly doing Scooby DVDs or movies, and they had two projects, Scooby DTVs they're called, that they had to scrap because there was some controversy around who they were going to do it about. One was like a Dukes of Hazzard, I think a Dukes of Hazzard crossover, and it was like, we can't do that because at the time it was like this big thing in America with the Confederate flag, and it was just like, it all came to a head. It's like, we can't do that. I understand. And there was something else, and they were like, we need an idea. And I'm like, you guys, I literally was like, you got to do Supernatural, Scooby Doo. I go, they're so analogous. I mean, it's obvious that Supernatural, Scooby Doo is a certain trope, but it's done so well, and it's, mystery solvers, it's that Hardy Boys, but it got a funny dog, and then Supernatural had some of the same elements that I thought was really funny. And I think sometimes Scooby Doo, especially with guest stars, work best when it's, serious versus funny. And I was like, you got to do it. And they were like, no, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. And I mean, they literally told me, like, that's so stupid, we're not going to do that. I'm like, ugh. So I tend to be pretty tenacious. So I kept bringing it up for months. I mean, it turned into years. And it was just like me just bringing this up, like, seriously, you guys should do Supernatural. You should do this. Well, cut to, I don't know if it was like a year or 2 years later, my friend, really good friend of mine who had written comic books, and then he ended up working on Supernatural season 4, and he ended up being the showrunner. And I called Jim up because Jim was working on Scooby stuff at Warner Brothers, and we were talking, and he said something about Scooby. I was like, you guys should really do Supernatural. I'm not going to stop, whatever. And he said, we should tell Andrew. We should just do it as a show, as like the live action show. I go, I think I mentioned it to Andrew. I go, but you know what? He just became a showrunner. I'm going to call him. I call him. I said, Andrew, would you ever want to do a crossover with Scooby Doo? He's like, would I? And like, I hang up the phone and I tell Jim, like, yeah, he's totally down. You've got to convince the president of Warner Brothers Animation to let us do this. And it just so happened that Entertainment Weekly had the cover was Jensen and Jared from Supernatural on the Impala, and he grabbed the magazine and he marches into the office like, listen, we got this idea and we'd love to do it. And he's like, that sounds amazing. And like within a half an hour, everybody was on board. And I was like, this is so weird. And so Jim and I kept thinking they were going to completely cancel us at any second. Like we thought they were going to stop us every step of the way. And every step of the way, it ended up being like, oh, that's great. Oh, that's perfect. Like we'd have these notes calls, and the notes calls were, this is hilarious. I'm like, there's no note. Like this has never happened to us ever. It's never happened to me since. It was just like everything we did with that project ended up being golden. And they hired Spike Brandt, was directing the animation, and he was and I remember when Spike showed us like an early storyboard cut, and it was like, it was gruesome. It was like, oh my gosh, this is so violent. There's no way they're going to let us do this. And the exec over at Warner Bros. Was like, yeah, this is great. Like, I was like, what? And it just kept happening where we would like say things, or Daphne would be having an existential crisis about the idea of supernatural stuff. And they're like, yeah, perfect. I'm like, how are we getting away with this? This is the most ridiculous thing ever, because usually there are all these rules surrounding Scooby. And much to my chagrin, because I've had Scooby projects where I worked on where it just became like this kind of like, ugh, they won't let me do this. They won't, but anyways, yeah, it came together, and then it was just beyond. It just became beyond. It was the reason that episode they asked. That's why I got to write on the show after that. They asked me to come on staff and write on Supernatural because it was such a big hit, and it was so well done. And Jim and I have worked together for ages, and like I said, there's I don't know which Scooby movie it is, or no, I think it's the Lego Scooby Doo, like Haunted Hollywood. And on the DVD, there's an extra where Jim is dressed in a leisure suit, and he's the Scooby Doo.
Oh yeah, and he's answering like questions.
Yeah, he's answering questions, and I'm like, I saw that, and I swear to you, I'm like, how is this not? How do you not do this? Like he could be the Elvira of Scooby Doo. Like he would do it for free, and it like answer questions, joy. Because I think Scooby, to a degree, I feel like somebody needs to get the fans involved again, like in a way that it's a club, more than anything. And anyways, I digress. So that was how ScoobyNatural came to be.
Yeah, as you said, ever since ScoobyNatural was released, it's taken the world by storm. It's become a cult classic.
Yeah.
But is there any part of the original script that was deleted that you wish made it to the final cut?
Well, I mean, obviously you've seen the cutout scene with Castiel and Scooby and Shaggy, serving dinner. There was one of the original things we wanted to do, but we didn't have enough time or money at the end of it, was we wanted to do the Scooby Doo opening, but we wanted it to be animated scenes from Supernatural. So it would be like Scooby Doo scenes, but then you'd see like animated Castiel with his shadow wings going, and you do back and forth. We wanted to do that. There are some things in there that the original script was much. There were things that were a little more chaste, that like they added in some sexual stuff. I was like, oh come on guys, or whatever. But generally it was all there. That's what was so bizarre, is we just kept going like, I mean, like I said, there's surely they're going to stop us at this point, and it's like at no point have they ever stopped us. It was ridiculous.
Oh no, I mean, I guess the closest that the episode gets to like delving into the more sexual side of things is, well, I was gonna say just like the kind of Dean looking at Daphne, but then there was all that stuff with Velma on the shoulders, which was just hilarious. Like that was
it was so funny to us, but like some people were taking it. We didn't think of it as seriously. We're just like, it's that thing, it's that boyhood crush on somebody. And then, but they're not like that. That was the whole point, is like the Scooby gang is not like that at all. And yeah, it's crazy. I mean, after that, we wanted to do a DTV that was the opposite. That was a Scooby movie that was, but the Winchesters just guest starred, so it'd be the kind of opposite foot. But yeah, it was unbelievable. And like I said, Jim, because he absolutely has no shame, he's like, we went up to Vancouver when they shot the live action stuff, and when Jensen says Scooby Dooby Doo, like if you look over his right hand shoulder, it's like Jeremy, if I'm there and Jim's there in the corner just sitting there like, oh, this is so cool, but we're so like out of focus and stuff. But still, it was like, this is the most ridiculous, because he's sitting there saying Scooby Dooby Doo on a public sidewalk, and there's like a crowd of fans just down the street that are like, what is going on? He's got an ascot, and it's just like the most ridiculous, because they didn't have any clue what was happening. We had to keep it secret for so long, and because it was animation, we wrote it a year in advance, and that was crazy unto itself, because we didn't know if it would happen. It really depended on if Supernatural was going to get a pickup or not, and that was always up in the air. But yeah, it's great. It was good fun.
Yeah, and we talk about how ScoobyNatural was, the Winchesters going into the world of Scooby, but it's very much still the Winchesters world. But with it being, the Scooby-Doo episode, A Night of Fright is No Delight, was that always the plan going into it, or were there ever any other episodes or movies discussed for the Winchesters to visit?
What's so funny is when Jim and I sat down to talk about it, Jim knew he's like, nope, Friday's night, like that's what he wanted to do. He was like, that's the one. I said, why? And he goes, I just like it. And it's like, it was, I think it was because it was contained. It was, there's not many things where we have to go. It was just, it just lent itself to the moment, and it's classic. So the fact that we've also made Dean, the Scooby Doo, like Dean knows everything about Scooby Doo, was great because he had kind of this insider knowledge. Like I know exactly what this is, so as everything goes off the rails, it freaks him out even more. And the fact that we made him like, no, I've got to protect that dog. Like, I love that. That's his thing. It's like, because not that I care, but like, Dean as a character and Sam, they grew up in hotel rooms, and they grew up, going from city to city. So they have this real intense connection to things like Scooby Doo. Obviously that informs them as characters, the fact that they hunt monsters. Dean at some point as a kid watched that show and was like, that's me. I'm them, and I think, I don't know, I always thought that was kind of cool. And I honestly didn't even know that Supernatural was created on the same day that Scooby Doo was. Like, both shows aired on the same exact day, and I was like, what? No, like, that's insane. Like, I had no idea. It was almost all cosmically fated. And I can't tell you how excited, like, somebody on the set kept putting like little funny Scooby things in different scenes, and like just fun little Easter eggs that we started and everybody was just so jazzed about it.
Yeah, like, it's just absolutely incredible. And you're absolutely right, it was fantastic how you had, Dean's backstory, and he was like a Scooby expert, and of course Sam was as well, but you only really see that towards the end of the animated section,
totally.
where they're kind of listing off all the Scooby villains. But I guess the kind of Scooby person in me was kind of like, of course, some of them in the canon that we know, the Scooby Gang wouldn't have been too familiar with at that point. But in hindsight, was this more of like an oversight to mention villains that hadn't been introduced already, or was it in fact an indication that the world that the Winchesters visited could be an alternate dimension of the original series?
That's what I think. My feeling is because this is really about a kid that was, possessed, like a ghost child. The idea is that kid probably has seen all the Scooby Doos, and this is kind of a weird manifestation of that within Scooby, like, the technology of the TV and the show going on, and this ghost kid thinking about Scooby being his safe place in a way too. So it is this kind of alternative universe that may or may not exist, because it's like what exists when you think about it. Like, if you think about it, then it kind of does exist in some way. So that's kind of how we thought about it. I did pitch when I was there. I wanted to get who was it? I wanted to get the girl who voices Scooby now, or voices Velma now. I wanted to do a live action moment where there was a knock at the door and Sam opens it and it's Velma, and she's straight up like, you've got to let me in, and then and of course she's kind of crushing on Sam, but at the same time it would be I can't think of her name, darn it. She was in Big Bang Theory. She's really famous, and she's delightful. At the time. Yeah. And it would be so fun to have her in and like dress as Velma. And then I wanted, like, halfway through, I wanted Shaggy to show up, like straight up, like give him the wig and the shirt again, but with like a shotgun, to be like, that's not Velma. Like, like it was like it'd be a twist. And I kept trying to pitch this, and they were all like, shut up.
Like, no, that would have worked so well. I mean, I believe at the time it was Matthew Lillard voicing Shaggy, who had already been a live action Shaggy in the first live action adaptations. And then from watching Scooby Doo, Where Are You Now, it showed kind of Kate McCucci and what she looks like, and she would be a good live action Velma as well. So both of those would have fit in so well. And you were talking about something there that was actually quite interesting. We had the honor of speaking with Peter New, who played the villain in the episode, and he was saying, as you were, about kind of hiding things on set and things like that. He said there was a little mystery machine model they wanted to hide. And do you know kind of how all this came about? Was it one person in particular's idea to just keep
I don't know if it was one of the
eggs?
camera guys or what, but he kept hiding it in like every scene. And Peter was super cool because we met him on set and we just started gabbing with him and having such a great time chatting with him, and he was super nice. But yeah, they just started hiding it, and then it premiered at Paley Fest, but they showed it at the Kodak Theater where they show the Oscars, and it was just thousands of fans. And the Impala was there, and the Mystery Machine was there, and there was somebody dressed up as Scooby, and we go in there, and it's just like, I mean, it was the best experience I've had, like, professionally, because people were howling and screaming, and you just don't know if people are going to respond to anything you do, and that was surprising. And again, there were people that were mad about the Dean kind of like hitting on Daphne thing, but I probably would have maybe played that a little different, maybe, if I did it now. But it was such a innocent thing in our eyes. Like, we weren't doing it, even though it was Dean. It had to be true to Dean, who's kind of scuzzy in that way. But that's where the comedy came. It was just like, oh, silly.
Boys Daphne plays it down really well, doesn't she? And kind of shows the innocence of the gang by saying, girls and boys don't share rooms, silly. And it's like, that's very true. We'd never seen them do that. And
I did a callback to the ScoobyNatural in the third episode I wrote for, where it's like, Dean has ScoobyNatural boxers and or Scooby Doo boxers, and he also, this wood nymph that's taking care of him, ends up giving him the nightgown, like making the nightgown that he has from ScoobyNatural, and he's like, it still feels like hugs. It was so funny.
Oh, that's amazing. And they have made like so much merch and things like that to go alongside ScoobyNatural. We've got a cushion we'll have to send you a picture of, because it's amazing. And the premiere sounds like it was such a special event as well. I mean, obviously in the episode you get to see the Mystery Machine next to the Impala, but to obviously have that set up in real life sounds incredible. And I guess that in itself was a really special moment. But do you have a special moment from working on the episode that stands out to you?
A lot of it was just like Jim and I working together, and this was my first live action really thing that I wrote. So that was special, getting to work with Jim and Andrew, who's a good friend of mine. That was really big. I will tell you that there was a moment, we're down in this pawn shop where they shot the live action stuff, and this is the first time I'm visiting the set of Supernatural, and there's this chair with my name on it, and that's always a little much. And Jensen comes in, and he had just put on the ascot, and people were snickering and laughing, and I was just like, this is bananas, and I see him in the ascot, and he's playing it up, and you're sitting there going like, they're saying words you wrote, like, this is the most insane thing. And because in animation, a lot of times you turn in a script and it's like I said, like 2 years later, you find out how did it turn out? This was more immediate in some ways, and just seeing him perform it was bananas. But the premiere was definitely, that was also huge. And then being asked to come on staff was huge. It's like so much stuff came out of ScoobyNatural that I was unaware. I was just like kind of flabbergasted by it, and really excited by it.
Yeah, you could definitely tell looking on screen that cast had a blast doing the show. They look like, they seem like Scooby fans themselves. It was
if you saw that, and they have a special feature where they're doing the voice record, and Jim and I were on we were here in the States, they're in Canada, and we were in on the record, so Jim would give kind of like, oh, you should do this or not. Spike was there too, but you could tell they were like, I can't believe we're doing this. They're that kind of like, I can't believe we're doing a Scooby Doo thing. And to see actors respond to like a line you wrote, and they're just like, oh, that's what, they're laughing about it too. Castiel's like a dog. Like, it's just like, oh, this is great. So
yeah, definitely. And of course, no spoilers for Supernatural. But do you think there could be any possibility of another ScoobyNatural crossover, or maybe even a prequel, or even a follow-up to ScoobyNatural that could work?
I will tell you that years ago, I was paid to write something like that. And there you go. I could, I mean, that's all I can tell you. It's like, I think, you know, I did something. I thought it was really, really good. And I think that, I think that just the pieces didn't come together for it for other people. But there, you know, there's a story, there's a script, you know, so.
Oh, very exciting.
Oh gosh.
Definitely. And it does appear that the adult Velma series by Mindy Kaling has survived Warner Brothers cancellation spree that we've seen, you know, for the past several weeks.
Right.
If you were given the opportunity, you know, being involved with Supernatural, what is your take on a more adult Scooby Doo?
A more adult Scooby Doo. I don't know. It's hard. It's already been done. It's called Buffy. You know, it's like, hey, that to me is always the thing. If you were gonna do it, like if I was gonna do something like that, honestly, it would be it's sort of like it, right? Like do something where they're much older and they kind of have to get the group back together and do this thing, which would be probably if I was going to do a serious version. But it's hard for me to think about. I don't know. I mean, I like the seriousness of Scooby, but I always love the smile that is there too, you know. But if I was going to do like, you know, the Riverdale version of Scooby, yeah, I don't know. I would make it. I would probably age it up, maybe, or I don't know. I mean, there's a space that you could do a serious version. That's now you got me thinking. This is a bad thing. Bad thing. Now I'll be thinking about it all day. Unfortunately, I don't know. Yeah, I think about Buffy and I think, man, they called themselves the Scooby Gang, and it was like, so that's kind of what it was, you know.
And there's like so many instances where Willow's wearing Scooby Doo t-shirts as well.
Oh yeah, she's got the lunchbox as well.
And yeah, she has a Scooby Doo lunchbox.
Yeah.
Oh.
It would. I mean, that's what would be cool. Is like if you had something, you know, where these kids do know what's going on in the world, and they just have to be. It would be slightly more serious. Like, you know, that would be kind of cool. I mean, I read Scooby Apocalypse, and that was like really dark and really. You know, violent and stuff too, but I think that's too much for me. So.
No, I mean it does make perfect sense. I mean, I love that you know, that comparison to the It and It Chapter 2, where in order to, you know, age it up a bit, they age up the characters, and also they can have liberty at that point to reference their younger selves. A little bit like how the original Zombie Island aged up the gang to tell a kind of more kind of scary story. And so, given the fact that you wrote the sequel to Zombie Island, to what extent was that original movie in your mind during that process?
No, the Return to Zombie Island was such a difficult project for me, and it was such a hard. We were supposed to be doing 3 movies. I don't know how much of this is privileged information, but we were supposed to be doing 3 movies. There was going to be there was going to be the 13th Ghost. Tim wrote that. There was going to be Return to Zombie Island, and you could see the subplot with like the sheriff, and there was different things that were going on that were going to pay off in the third one. That ended up being that there was a lot of movement and change at Warner Brothers, so we ended up not doing. Though part of it was kind of used in this Halloween one by Max Adams and stuff. But that was a really difficult project because the original holds a place in so many people's hearts as this like really scary thing, and also there are really supernatural elements and stuff. And then you have Jim, who's just like, no, you know, there's no supernatural, and then it was in the context of trying to fit that movie into some sort of universal Scooby continuity in a weird way. And then we had, we were going to get this guest star. Okay, we didn't get that guest star. Okay, we're going to get this guest star. Okay, we didn't get. So there was a lot of changes that were happening during the course. It was professionally probably one of the most difficult things I had done, because there was a lot of changes back and forth. And again, there was a lot of interesting stuff, like in the movie, you have the producers like burning the ferry to get off the island. Like, no, we're staying here. Originally, I had Velma do that. Velma goes kind of nuts because she's like, this is the one that I didn't solve. Like, you know, she's still somewhat convinced that it wasn't supernatural, and she's like, we're not leaving until we solve it. And they're like, Velma's not going to burn down whatever. I'm like, it would be hilarious. She's like obsessed with, like, you know, fixing this thing. And they're like, no. And I was like, ugh, you know, and so we had to change things, and we had to, like, yes, the cat people in this movie aren't really cat people, but we have to hint at the end that the other one did happen, because again, you're dealing with all these different people that have different ideas about what Scooby can and can't be. And as a writer, it's difficult. You're trying to thread that needle and have fun doing it. The thing I think we accomplished well, or at least the thing that I like, the meta of it, is that in my head, I thought, you're never going to be able to do Zombie Island. But the idea they go back to it, they've been to so many different places and they've solved so many different mysteries. It'd be hilarious to be back at a place that they had a mystery, but they don't recognize it because it's been completely transformed. And then they're like, oh no, you're in a movie about the thing that really happened. Like, there was this kind of like weird thing. But, you know, that's making movies and animation. It's like, sometimes it works and sometimes it didn't. And for that one, it didn't really work for me as much as I'd hoped it did. It was really, like I said, it was a really difficult professionally. I don't know, just time and different things. But yeah.
I mean, firstly, on your idea of Velma setting fire to the boat, I love that, because honestly, it was set up in the 13 Ghosts. Then with Zombie Island, I remember ending that movie and just saying to JayBee, and we were reviewing it with some friends as well, because we have another kind of Scooby show where we go through movies and things like that. And I just remember turning around to them and just saying, Velma's not okay right now. I'm worried about Velma, because at the end of that movie, she is so torn, because like you say, there was still a nod that it could have happened.
Right.
And she just seems so torn at the end of it that you could imagine her like burning a boat because she has to solve it. Like, it seems like the state of mind she was in. Yeah.
I mean, that's how we felt. And we were building toward another third movie that was going to kind of like capitalize on all of that. But that's the gig.
I mean, like you said, that there was some elements that, like, having people play the initial characters and like the cat people and everything, being able to have that parallel and everything like that, it was done so well to see that callback and how they then get like registered that they actually have been here before. But one absence that we noticed was the detective from the first one, Bo. Was there ever any conversations about their involvement, if they were going to come back at all?
No, there wasn't. I mean, sometimes it's also about at the time, if I'm trying to remember, but at the time, there's also a lot of requirements now about how many scenes you can have and how many people you can have in terms of just paying out people and doing stuff like that. So I don't think so, because again, it was like, at one point I thought we were going to get Stephen King into this thing. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like I was like, I will lose my mind. Like, this will be the greatest thing ever. Stephen King and Scooby Doo. Are you kidding me? You know? And it didn't happen. I was so crushed, but there were a couple other people, and I was just kind of rewriting outlines on the fly for the individual characters. And I was kind of concentrating on that. But no, I don't think we did think about it. But it's been so many years. Somebody could come back, and go, yeah, we did, and I'll be like, oh, okay.
Well, I mean, I think Stephen King would have been a perfect fit for, like, because I think Zombie Island is ultimately deemed by many people kind of one of the spookiest mysteries that Scooby and the gang have ever faced. So to bring a character like Stephen King in for that would have been incredible. And you probably saw from JB's reaction, he's a huge Stephen
like
King
right
fan.
Underneath this Scooby collection is just all Stephen King.
Yeah, he's got like so many of them, like first edition signed ones. He's an avid collector of it. So
I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan, and the idea with like, it would have been really, unbelievable. But I started working with Rick Morales. He had produced Scooby Doo Hollywood Haunt. He produced Return to Zombie Island, and he makes, listen, he makes gold out of anything. So to a degree, it's like I'm really happy. And the funny thing is, my kids love it. You know, I actually think if they watch the original Zombie Island, they'd be scared to death.
Yeah.
And I think the original Zombie Island was the first time it really was supernatural, right? Like that was the first time the Scooby Gang really saw something that was supernatural, or that it
I think
ended
all
up.
the time that they were together witnessing it, because Shaggy and Scooby had their thing with the 13
Right,
ghosts and
right,
then Boo Brothers, but the first time the whole gang, I think, witnessed something
right,
supernatural was in the
right.
Zombie Island movie.
Yeah.
Which would totally I mean, I think that totally transformed kind of the way that Scooby's gone through so many different iterations, you know. And it's everybody has their favorite too. It's almost like their favorite doctor from Doctor Who. It's like, oh, who'd you grow up with, you know?
JB's face through a lot of this is incredible. You're literally saying all the things that he loves. Like he
Oh,
was just
you're
comparing Doctor Who and
cool.
Scooby Doo the other
I
day
mean,
for the different.
that's how Jim and I became friends. We were we would do there was a Doctor Who night, and my friend invited me, and I invited Jim, and that's how we met, and that's how Jim ended up pulling me into the orbit of all the other stuff. It was Doctor Who. I mean, it's the I love all that stuff. So
That's amazing.
That's incredible. And I think a perfect analogy as well for kind of the different eras that Scooby's gone through. And I think you're saying, like, you know, everyone that worked on this kind of, you know, we're used to turning things to gold, really. And I do think that this movie did that because, like I say, we do have a review show where we discuss movies, and we had so much conversation around this movie and the ending about kind of the black cat at the end. If that could have been Bo, if something could have happened to him where he turned into one of the cat people. And we were discussing all these theories around that for, honestly, I think the episode probably about 2 hours where we were going over everything and discussing it, because there was so much still open, like you say, that could have gone into a third movie to explain things more. But do you know if there's any kind of weight to the thought of the black cat bimbo, or if it's kind of ever thought about what that would mean?
No, I mean, we thought about it just in terms of like, we have to indicate that the first movie happened for reals, you know. And like I said, there was a certain element of like, we dropped little things about, Daphne's internship. Like it was sort of like we were trying to fit this movie that was definitively the Scooby game, like post being the young mystery solvers in a way, and we were trying to fudge it a little bit, like no, that was just a summer, you know. like they were still that age, and we're just going to cram them into this little you know. It was kind of our weird, you know, version of that, though. You know, thinking about it would be funny. It's like all the movies and franchises are doing multiverse things. It would be funny to have like a Scooby multiverse movie from the different versions of Scooby.
I mean, that could even kind of be similar to, you know, like the cyber chase where they meet alternate versions of themselves.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing about Scooby. It's like, it's going to be around. It's been around forever. It's going to be around forever. Mm-hmm. And some of the joy is like trying to figure out how to capitalize on that, and just and keep making stories that are really fun, you know, that people can enjoy. And I don't know. I mean, it's weird how enduring it is, because there's not many things out there that endures like that. And then it'll go quiet, and then suddenly, boom, it'll pop back up, and people are like, "Oh, I love Scooby Doo." That was the thing about ScoobyNatural that surprised me. There were so many people that were having this real visceral reaction of seeing Scooby Doo again, and they hadn't seen him for so long, and they were just like, "This is amazing. This is my childhood." Like there was this kind of like embracing of like, "I love Scooby," you know, and it was like, "Yeah, we all love Scooby, don't we?" Yeah. You know?
Yeah, you know, Scooby's just that lovable dog, and everybody that you know knows Scooby Doo. And even though it's the same formula for every movie, it's just, you know, that comforting character. And we see that more recently with your project Sword in the Scoob, and that is such a fun Scooby movie. It has every essence, everything you want from a Scooby movie, that movie has. Was the presence for that movie your idea, or was the initial story pitched to you?
No, I pitched that, and I'm trying to remember what it was. It was like there were a couple things that Scooby had never done, and I pitched Sword in the Scoob, and I pitched another one, kind of where I got the Fred Man of Action thing. It was like the idea that Fred as James Bond in a way, like embroiled in this thing in Britain. And what had happened was Ricky Gervais had done a episode of the new Scooby Doo, and I think that they were like, oh, we could get Ricky Gervais to do one of these things, or a British actor or something like that. And so I was coming up with all these British pitches, you know, and the Sword and the Scoob. I'm a huge fan of Arthurian legend in general, and it changed a little bit because the overarching story is the same. I think the way I wrote it was that the king was a little more serious. Like they were a little more like trying to make them believe that, yes, you are in medieval. There wasn't like any as snarky as probably it ended up being. But I was off the project by then. And I think Max came in and he's been kind of taking a lot of the Scooby stuff at Warner Brothers. So the main premise, all that stuff, a lot of it is still what I wrote. But yeah, I wanted to do that. I wanted to do this kind of like, I think I had just done like an ancestry.com and we were like laughing about it. And we're like, oh, that's a great Scooby setup of like, you know, you happen to be a relative of this ancient, you know, whatever. And everybody doesn't want you to lay claim to the land. And it just was really silly in my mind's eye. And Jim, like I said, Jim has a very particular sense. So I remember we were talking about it and he goes, no, this is just great. Well, it's like, you know, the town's over here and they've made like a Renaissance festival over here. And it's like, it's all works together. And that's kind of the fun of the mystery. It's like, there's also this con that's going on in a way. Yeah, that was fun. It was a lot of fun. A great cover, by the way. The DVD cover of that is just like so good.
Yeah. Really pop. Yeah, it was really awesome to see King Arthur and Scooby Doo. And there's that one part. I don't think a lot of people, if you don't know the King Arthur story, you know, his wife like cheats on him, and you'll see, you know, that little flirty thing she does. So I think that's really cool. The way you added some King Arthur elements into the film.
Yeah.
So maybe not everybody caught up on, but if you know the King Arthur story,
you know, King Arthur really stuff. Cool. Yeah, I'm a big King Arthur fan.
Yeah. So when you were pitching it, did you know you wanted this movie set in the UK with King Arthur, or did that come with?
Yeah. I mean, that was the thing. It's like I think they knew they had access to hopefully more British actors that would want to do Scooby Doo, and it was just like, okay, here's like 4 British themed Scooby Doo ideas, you know. And the James Bond one that I wanted to do, I thought was really fun because I thought they could like, you know, upgrade the Mystery Machine like a James Bond vehicle, and like you could do all this stuff. And I think we had something. It was like, it was really funny. I don't know. It was like Scooby Doo License to Bark. It was something really silly. It was like a really silly. I can't remember it, but I remember howling because I was like, "Oh, that's good. That's I really wanted to do that one." But I think
on like License to Real or something. I don't know.
Yeah. It was something really silly and really Scooby, but inevitably they just went for the Sword and the Scoob, which I think was a layup. I think I might even called it something else. I might have called it originally like Scooby Doo and King Arthur's Court or something.
I think that was kind of leaked beforehand, and then we heard about Sword and the Scoob.
Yeah. I think that was the original in my head what we wrote, but
I mean, it is interesting.
It all changes. It's all collaborative, and it moves, and you know, if you're a writer, it's like you turn it in, and then you have these dynamic artists that are like changing a joke for the better generally, and you have these directors and the voice actors will add stuff, and then it's such a collaborative exercise. Animation in general, it really is a remarkable thing.
Oh, it is amazing. And like you say, it's so interesting that you mentioned wanting to bring in, you know, kind of famous British actors to play some of the role. And and just being someone from the UK that has grown up with, you know, the British films, it was so cool to see characters such as, you know, Nick Frost play Merlin, and Jason Isaacs play Arthur. It's just so crazy because growing up with those voices and those faces from both, you know, the Cornetto trilogy for Nick Frost and of course Harry Potter for Jason Isaacs, like when writing for those characters, like did you know about who was going to be cast or the kind of that you were looking at?
I had somebody in mind for Arthur. I'm trying to think who I had in mind for Merlin. The fact that it was Nick Frost to me was cool because I like spaced a lot, and I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's amazing. and Jason Isaacs is, Malfoy's dad. So you're sitting there going like, oh my goodness gracious. I didn't know that he could be quite as, sarcastic and funny as he is.
Dick Dastardly and Scoob as well.
Yeah.
A lot of Scooby things lately.
Yeah. So that was a surprise. But in my head, I usually have somebody's voice in mind. And I think, I'm trying to think, because they changed the beginning of it. And I was surprised to see it. I kind of like what they did. It was like, oh, they recognized the rippling abs of the guy who played Thunder the Barbarian or whatever in Sword and Scoob. And I had a totally different opening, and I can't remember for the life what it was. I'd have to dig out the script and see, but it was like it was something going down on a plane. Oh, you know what it was? It was like I think the person I wrote it for was so well known that at a certain point it was like somebody's like, wait a second, you did something that I recognize from, I don't know if it was Rowan Atkinson or Ricky Gervais or something, but I was like, I want him to have a tell that when he does it, everybody's like, oh my goodness, we know who you are.
Oh, it could be like Jonathan Ross or something with this. That'd be great.
I mean, there's so many elements of that movie that we do love. And one thing that is especially incredible is, when they're doing the time traveling scene and you get flashbacks through some of the old series, that was great to see that it kind of validated that they were still part of that continuity. Because sometimes a lot of Scooby movies seem very standalone and almost that there's no kind of link in terms of time wise. They could be in any order in particular, but just to see that was such an original concept and we absolutely loved it. So was there any discussion over what scenes were going to be included as they traveled back, or was it just kind of what came in at animation stage?
I think the animation stage, I think they probably added it in after the fact. And what's great is the people working on this all love it in a way that it's just remarkable. They really do. I mean, luckily I hang out with a lot of the writers that have done, certainly like Tim Sheridan, who's done Gourmet Ghost and 13th, we talk every day, and Jim, who has produced and, Frank, and, wrote Frank and Creepy and all these things. But then as much as we think we know stuff, we'll send it up the line and you'll get the producers and the storyboard guys, and they'll add stuff that you're just like, oh, that's so great. I wish I would have thought of that, but it's great. Like I said, they just plus it up. So when you're watching it and you guys are like responding to that, it's like, oh, some brilliant person up there had that idea,
See, what's really interesting to hear is with some like rewatching the Scooby movies, there was a couple of movies like that were all together that I was kind of a bit, I don't know, finding things quite similar. And some of the names you've just mentioned there, and kind of like the Gourmet Ghost era and the Return to Zombie Island era, was when I was starting to enjoy them again. So just kind of knowing that you all got on so well, it's kind of, okay, maybe it's just that similar thought process that goes into them that's made them so enjoyable again.
Jim Krieg loves Scooby Doo. Like it is, he loves it with a passion. I like it. He loves it. Like, so there is a certain amount of like, he really cares about it in a way. And it's weird because I started out just liking it. And then as you get more involved in it and just, you start to care about it. You start to realize how important these characters are, not just to a lot of people and a lot of people's childhood and just the world. And there's like the way that Jim had always described it to me, he was like, the reason he was so demanding about it not, like the supernatural not existing, is because he's like, the point of Scooby Doo is to let kids face fear, knowing that it's just a man in the mask, that it's just this, it is a dynamic way to help people kind of like face monsters and face the unexplainable, but with a cool head and a funny smile. And it was just really neat. I mean, the way that he talks about it, that's obviously his love and of where he came in at Scooby Doo, obviously, and why he also is like, no, certain things. So even though he co-wrote ScoobyNatural with me, so
I mean, 53 years later, Scooby Doo is still going as strong as ever. I mean, we were pretty much in a stage where we were seeing kind of 2 movies a year in regards to like the kind of direct to TV kind of thing. And there's been so many concepts thrown around recently of what we can be expecting from the next one. I know they've kind of announced Trick or Treat now, but there's also been some discussion around kind of crossovers with DC, perhaps Crypto the Dog. And given that you have a background, you know, writing in the superhero genre, is a project like that crossover something you'd ever be interested in working on?
I would always be interested in doing more Scooby Doo, but I'm kind of removed from it now, sadly. It's just one of those things where, I'm doing Mortal Kombat, and they're like, "Ooh, yeah, that's a little bloody. Maybe we won't be," And so, I have a feeling I'm not done with Scooby in general, but I would be, of course, it would be amazing to do more Scooby. It really would. I always enjoyed it. I always loved it. I'll never not love it. It has such a special place in my heart. So,
well, that's great, because we'd certainly love to see more projects that has your name on it, because we've enjoyed them all so much.
Thank you very much.
Definitely. Do you have any other upcoming projects that you can share with us today?
Yeah, I mean, I have a Super Sons movie, which is about Batman and Superman's son, coming out next month. They'll be premiering it at Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con, which I'll be at. And then I have the other movie, which is Mortal Kombat Snowblind, is premiering the same week. So both of the movies come out next month. And then I'm continuing writing the Flash comic book for DC Comics, which has been an absolute blast. And people have really responded to it, and the fans have been incredible. So I've busy bee, as it were.
That's incredible. Where's the best place that fans can keep up with your work?
So it's the weirdest name ever, but Space Kicker. I just type it into Google and find me. But generally, I'm at Twitter, and that's where I pretty much interact with people more than Instagram or anywhere else. So Twitter is generally the place.
Oh, well, that's absolutely amazing. And thank you so much for all the time you've given us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you about the amazing things that you've been involved in that we love so much. So thank you so much for that. And all of the links you mentioned, I'm gonna include in the description down below. Just thank you so much, because it's been absolutely amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you so much to everyone for listening to this episode today and watching, however you've consumed this interview. It really does mean a lot to us. You can find all of Kalia's social links, a great Instagram account in the description down below as well, along as our link tree too. So if you want to see more, then please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.